my name is Tolg and I exist, therefore I think too much. I'm going to read Kafka, the Metamorphosis. I'm in my backyard because my significant other is sick and the house is making us sick. So there's that. I think this could be considered a perfect read through, as I'm not ranting, but generally just giving my opinion after I read for what it was that I ended up reading. I left off with Gregor's sister and mother moving the furniture around, and Gregor as now what I perceive to be a spider. Freaked out that he might be losing his humanity due to the furniture being moved around, therein attempting an idea as to how to save it, so that's where we will start. Although Gregor kept reassuring himself that nothing out of the way was happening, but only a few bits of furniture were being changed around, he soon had to admit that all this trotting to and fro of the two women, their little ejaculations, and the scraping of furniture along the floor affected him like a vast disturbance coming from all sides at once. And however much he tucked in his head and legs and cowered to the very floor, he was bound to confess that he would not be able to stand it for long. They were clearing his room out, taking away everything he loved. The chest in which he kept his fret saw and other tools was already dragged off. They were now loosening the writing desk, which had almost sunk into the floor, the desk at which he had done all his homework when he was at the commercial academy, at the grammar school before that, and yes, even at the primary school. He had no more time to waste in weighing the good intentions of the two women, whose existence he had by now almost forgotten, for they were so exhausted that they were laboring in silence, and nothing could be heard but the heavy scuffling of their feet. And so he rushed out. The women were just leaning against the writing desk in the next room to give themselves a breather, and 4 times changed his direction, since he really did not know what to rescue first. Then, on the wall opposite, which was already otherwise cleared, he was struck by the picture of the lady muffled in so much fur, and quickly crawled up to it, and pressed himself to the glass, which was a good surface to hold on to, and comforted his hot belly. This picture, at least, which was entirely hidden beneath him, was going to be removed by nobody. He turned his head toward the door of the living room so as to observe the women when they came back. They had not allowed themselves much of a rest, and were already coming. Greet had twined her arm around her mother and was almost supporting her. "Well, what shall we take now?" said Greet, looking around. Her eyes met Gregor's from the wall. She kept her composure, presumably because of her mother, bent her head down to her mother to keep her from looking up, and said, although in a fluttering, unpremeditated voice, "Come, hadn't we better go back to the living room for a moment?" Her intentions were clear enough to Gregor. She wanted to bestow her mother in safety and then chase him down from the wall. Well, just let her try it. He clung to his picture and would not give it up. He would rather fly in Greet's face. But Greet's words had succeeded in disquieting her mother, who took a step to one side, caught sight of the huge brown mass on the flowered wallpaper, and before she was really conscious that what she saw was Gregor, screamed in a loud, hoarse voice, "Oh God! Oh God!" fell with outspread arms over the sofa as if giving up, and did not move. "Gregor!" cried his sister, shaking her fist and glaring at him. This was the first time she had directly addressed him since his metamorphosis. She ran into the next room for some aromatic essence with which to rouse her mother from her fainting fit. Gregor wanted to help too. There was still time to rescue the picture, but he was stuck fast to the glass and had to tear himself loose. He then ran after his sister into the next room, as if he could advise her, as he used to do, but then had to stand helplessly behind her. She meanwhile searched among various small bottles, and when she turned around, started in alarm at the sight of him. One bottle fell on the floor and broke. A splinter of glass cut Gregor's face, and some kind of corrosive medicine splashed him. Without pausing a moment longer, Greek gathered up all the bottles she could carry and ran to her mother with them. She banged the door shut with her foot. Gregor was now cut off from his mother, who was perhaps nearly dying because of him. He dared not open the door for fear of frightening away his sister, who had to stay with her mother. There was nothing he could do but wait, and harassed by self-reproach and worry, he began now to crawl to and fro, over everything, walls, furniture, and ceiling, and finally, in his despair, when the whole room seemed to be reeling around him, fell down into the middle of the big table. A little while elapsed. Gregor was still lying there feebly, and all around was quiet. Perhaps that was a good omen. Then the doorbell rang. The servant girl was, of course, locked in her kitchen, and Greet would have to open the door. It was his father. "What's been happening?" were his first words. Greet's face must have told him everything. Greet answered in a muffled voice, apparently hiding her head on his breast. Mother has been fainting, but she's better now. Gregor's broken loose. Just what I expected, said his father. Just what I've been telling you, but you women would never listen. It was clear to Gregor that his father had taken the worst interpretation of Greet's all too brief statement. That was assuming that Gregor had been guilty of some violent act. Therefore, Gregor must now try to propitiate his father, since he had neither time nor means for an explanation. And so he fled to the door of his own room and crouched against it to let his father see as soon as he came in from the hall that his son had the good intention of getting back into his room immediately, and that it was not necessary to drive him there, but that if only the door were opened he would disappear at once. Yet his father was not in the mood to perceive such fine distinctions. "Ah!" he cried as soon as he appeared in a tone that sounded at once angry and exultant. Gregor drew his head back from the door and lifted it to look at his father. Truly, this was not the father he had imagined to himself. Admittedly, he had been too absorbed of late in his new recreation of crawling over the ceiling to take the same interest as before in what has happened elsewhere in the flat. And he ought really to be prepared for some changes. And yet, could that be his father? The man who used to lie warily sunk in bed whenever Gregor set out on a business journey, who welcomed him back of an evening lying in a long chair in a dressing gown, who could not really rise to his feet but only lifted his arms in greeting, and on the rare occasion when he did go out with his family on 1 or 2 Sundays a year and on highest holidays, walked between Gregor and his mother, who were slow walkers anyhow, even more slowly than they did, muffled in his own old greatcoat, shuffling laboriously forward with the help of his crook-handled stick, which he set down most cautiously at every step, and whenever he wanted to say anything nearly always came to a full stop and gathered his escort around him. Now he was standing there in fine shape, dressed in a smart blue uniform with gold buttons, such as bank messengers wear. His strong double chin bulged over the stiff high collar of his jacket. From under his bushy eyebrows his black eyes darted fresh and penetrating glances. His one-time tangled white hair had been combed flat on either side of a shining and carefully exact parting. He pitched his cap, which bore a gold monogram, probably the badge of some bank, in a wide sweep across the whole room onto a sofa, and with the tail ends of his jacket thrown back, his hands in his trouser pockets, advanced with a grim visage toward Gregor. Likely enough, he did not himself know what he meant to do. At any rate, he lifted his feet uncommonly high, and Gregor was dumbfounded at the enormous size of his shoe soles. But Gregor could not risk standing up to him, aware as he had been from the very first day of his new life that his father believed only the severest measure suitable for dealing with him. And so he ran before his father, stopping when he stopped and scuttling forward again when his father made any kind of move. In this way they circled the room several times, without anything decisive happening. Indeed, the whole operation did not even look like a pursuit because it was carried out so slowly. And so Gregor did not leave the floor, for he feared that his father might take as a piece of peculiar wickedness any excursion of his over the walls or the ceiling. All the same, he could not stay this course much longer, for while his father took one step, he had to carry out a whole series of movements. He was already beginning to feel breathless, just as in his former life his lungs had not been very dependable. As he was staggering along, trying to concentrate his energy on running hardily, keeping his eyes open, in his dazed state never even thinking of any other escape than simply going forward, and having almost forgotten that the walls were free to him, which in this room were well provided with finely carved pieces of furniture full of knobs and crevices, suddenly something lightly flung landed close behind him and rolled before him. It was an apple. A second apple followed immediately. Gregor came to a stop in alarm. There was no point in running on, for his father was determined to bombard him. He had filled his pockets with fruit from the dish on the sideboard and was now shying apple after apple, without taking particularly good aim for the moment. The small red apples rolled about the floor as if magnetized and cannoned into each other. Oh, I misread that, sorry. And cannoned into each other. An apple thrown without much force grazed Gregor's back and glanced off harmlessly, but another following immediately landed right on his back and sank in. Gregor wanted to drag himself forward as if this startling, incredible pain could be left behind him, but he felt as if nailed to the spot, and flattened himself out in a complete derangement of all his senses. With his last conscious look, he saw the door of his room being torn open, and his mother rushing out ahead of his screaming sister in her underbodice. for her daughter had loosened her clothing to let her breathe more freely and recover from her swoon. He saw his mother rushing toward his father, leaving one after another behind her on the floor, her loosened petticoats stumbling over her petticoats straight to his father and embracing him, in complete union with him. But here Gregor's sight began to fail, with her hands clasped around his father's neck as she begged for her son's life. Chapter 3 starts after that, and I know I've only read for 10 minutes, but as I am generally upsetting, I think that I will stop there. I think I've said it in prior readings, but I'm pretty sure at this point it is understood that Gregor's father is finally finding his place as the family's supporter again. And in prior confusion, he chose lackadaisical approaches, almost in giving his pride over to his son of being the monetary provider for the family. Now that he has that position and reliance back, as much as it was a grievance of his in the past, it is still a position of power and understood power. And so in this metamorphosis, or in his son becoming someone who is incapable of supporting the family, he has now found that power back in finding his son in a position of being outside of what is now known to him, of being incapacitated. He now needs to subjugate him into a more controlled area, presuming a threat onto the rest of the family, because too many changes have happened one right after the other, presumably. His sister, in the meantime, is just trying to protect and keep everybody situated, okay with where they're at. And I guess the other thing of note is that, back in whenever this was, someone who is suffering asthma still has to wear a fucking corset. His mother had to undo a corset in order to be able to breathe. Of goddamn course they're suffering from asthmatic issues and not capable of generally getting a job. You can't breathe. So yeah, and then putting the son in a position of pain because this change has happened on top of an already understood change, where the father is now needing to take up a position of control again in order to be a provider. That control puts itself into a position of how much control do I need to participate in? How much control do I need to have over the situation, and not understanding the other party, not communicating, or maybe being able to communicate with the other party to understand what is an overstep, what is too much control, what is a lack of health in an environment, all while the son is still trying to cling to his humanity and therein his loss thereof. It's a fucking sordid picture, as it's always been. As much as the Metamorphosis written by Kafka is a short story, it's fucking sad. So there's that. I'm going to leave you with do well, be well, eat well, sleep well, drink well, and may your wants align with your needs. Bye.